Last fall, a group of Democratic lawmakers, all of whom were military veterans or members of the intelligence community, created a 90-second video where they reminded U.S. service members that they have a constitutional obligation to ignore unlawful military orders. Seems pretty obvious and straightforward, but of course, it didn't stop Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth from freaking out about it. They labeled it seditious behavior. Pete Hegseth demoted Mark Kelly's military rank, and Donald Trump instructed Fox News hack and U.S. Attorney Janine Pirro to go after these Democratic lawmakers and try to secure indictments against them. Well, guess what? That attempt to get them indicted failed. Now, we're going to walk through all of this, but the first thing I want to lay out here is the fact that it is pretty easy to secure indictments from a grand jury if there is any sort of evidence of criminal wrongdoing. So the fact that this grand jury refused to indict these lawmakers the way Donald Trump wanted them to is obviously a win for the justice system, but it also shows how thin and embarrassing this whole case was in the first place. It was a non-issue, and it is sad, scary, and crazy that the administration even tried to do something like this in the first place. And Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin, senators from Arizona and Michigan, came out today swinging in a press conference that they held after they learned the news last night that these indictments were attempted but not secured by Janine Pirro. So I want to walk through what went down in this press conference, what they talked about. And so let's start with what Mark Kelly talked about. He got up there and spoke first, and we'll start with him. Let's take a look.
Folks, this is the master alarm flashing for our democracy. It is threatening the very foundation of our system, that we have a right to free speech, to lawfully speak out and protest our government without fear of retaliation. That we have a Congress whose responsibility and obligation is to oversee and criticize, when necessary, the executive branch.
And I want to focus on Kelly's core point here, which is the fact that Congress has an obligation to oversee the executive branch, and they are not doing it right now. That is not an optional part of the legislative branch. It is not a partisan part of the legislative branch. Overseeing and conducting oversight on the executive branch is one of the core duties of the legislative branch. And in the second Trump term, we've seen the legislative branch held by Republicans completely abdicate that responsibility. And right now, unfortunately, Democrats are left with oversight, and they're left with their words, and their recourse beyond that is limited. And I think what is so crazy about all of this too is if you go back and watch that original video, which I've done a video about it previously, all of these lawmakers who are in this video, they say the same thing over and over again. It is literally a copy paste of them reading the same script, which is, you have an obligation to ignore unlawful orders. There is nothing illegal about that. None of this they didn't say, hey, go out and defy Donald Trump. That might have been how Republicans interpreted it, but Democrats were just saying something pretty matter of fact. And I think the only way you can interpret a video like that as sedition is if you assume that unlawful orders are coming. The Republicans are projecting in this situation because they know the president is carrying out unlawful orders. And it just put us in this place where I know there wasn't I feel like in the past, 12 hours since this news came out, the indictment wasn't secured, there's been some response from people on the Hill, but there have been a lot of shoulder shrugs. And I almost want to caution against it, because I know it's easy to look at these senators and think, well, they're senators and they're powerful and they're going to be fine. But we already have everyday American citizens being oppressed on the streets. We're watching that happen with ICE deployments and the National Guard deployments into major American cities. We're watching Americans get shot on the streets. We're already watching everyday Americans get oppressed. And now the next piece of all of this is the oppression of political opposition. That is a key part of authoritarian control and takeovers. And so I would caution people against shoulder shrugging just because this indictment failed. It is a relief that the justice system held up in this circumstance, but it is scary that we are here in the first place. And I want to move on to what Senator Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan had to say about this, and she put an interesting lens on this, just in terms of the lack of morals and leadership that we have at the very top of the country right now. Let's take a look.
The paradigm of leadership has come in completely reversed. In 2026, instead of looking to our elected leaders like the president as setting an example, it is now up to individual citizens in their private capacity to uphold the values of democracy, free speech, liberty, justice. As Mark said, this is an authoritarian playbook that many of us have watched play out abroad over and over and over again, except now we're seeing it in the United States.
And she's right. This is not something so many of us ever thought we'd face in the United States. And she's talking about, and obviously doing this call to action for Americans to try to demonstrate and uphold American values in their everyday life. But I would also say, we need to do that, but also not shy away from what we are seeing in Washington. I know it is kind of our human instinct at this point, especially in the US, to tune out and disengage when we see stuff like this, because it's better to pretend like it's not happening. And we can't do that heading into the midterms this year. We need to live out our values, but also be ready to go out, exercise our constitutional First Amendment rights, make a lot of noise, protest, and send a message in the midterms to the modern Republican Party that is so loud that no amount of election tampering and meddling can get in the way of it. And something that I loved that Alyssa Slotkin said toward the end of this press conference was about how much this means to the lawmakers that are being targeted in Donald Trump's retribution campaign for this video. And so I'm going to play what she said there. Let's take a look.
Senator Kelly and I have both served our country. We have risked our lives for our country. This country has given me everything. So if we have to sit here and take physical intimidation and legal intimidation to uphold the country we love, we will happily do that. We know right from wrong. Whether you voted for President Trump or you voted for Kamala Harris, we know right from wrong. And weaponizing the legal system against people for basic freedom of speech goes against everything we were taught since third grade. And I'm more than happy to defend it.
And Slotkin is essentially saying here, if defending constitutional principles leads to me ending up in physical harm or prison, bring it on. And there is something very admirable about that. And there's also something deeply alarming about the fact that it even has to be said in the first place. We are not a country that throws senators into prison for exercising their free speech rights. That shit is happening in Russia. It is not supposed to happen here. And of course, the vanguards of free speech, liberty, and American values are nowhere to be seen raising their hands up about this and calling out what is clearly deeply authoritarian behavior here. So when he was asked about it last night, what did one of the most morally bankrupt people in the modern GOP have to say about it? Our good old Christian Mike Johnson. Let's see what he had to say.
Mr. Speaker, news just broke this evening that federal prosecutors tried to indict the 6 Democrats in the disobey illegal orders video, but a grand jury in Washington rejected that. Do you believe that those 6 Democrats should be indicted?
I'm going to reserve comment on this until I review that. That's the first I've heard of it. I mean, I think that anytime you're obstructing law enforcement and getting in the way of these sensitive operations, it's a very serious thing, and it probably is a crime, they probably should be indicted.
But they were just reiterating the law that members of the military should not have to obey illegal orders.
Yeah, but I think they went further than that. I think they were suggesting that they disobey the order.
They didn't go further than that. They merely reminded military members that they should follow the law. The suggestion that Mike Johnson is talking about is his projection, because he knows that Donald Trump would not think twice about giving illegal orders to the military. And look, in a normal democracy, reminding people to follow the law is not controversial. The grand jury held the line this time, and there is, of course, a silver lining and a comfort in that. But the fact that it even reached this stage shows you how far this administration has gone and how far they are willing to continue going to create an absolute uniform authoritarian bubble around Donald Trump. That's it for me today. If you liked what you saw in this video, throw a like on it. Follow the Demwins Media YouTube channel. Follow me at buildingthebench.substack.com, and we will keep bringing you the news as you need to see it. Thanks for watching.